on? No. That's probably even better. I'm Meghan Hurley. I am the VP of Brand at Claire's.
Awesome. So very first question. How many people here ever got their ears or another part of their anatomy pierced to Claire's? Wow. There you go. That's fantastic. That says a lot about the brand and the longevity of the brand and everything else. So I'm just curious. You know, it's kind of that rite of passage, right? That's where a lot of people enter with brand, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it really is. I never get sick of all the stories, so please come and tell me about who you had to bribe to get your ears pierced, who took you, when it was promised. I love it. I love it.
Awesome. So, you know, we spent the day talking about innovation, so it's kind of funny to start out here, but I'm just curious, from your perspective, what does that word even mean, right? Is it about getting in a room with switchy balls and colored Post-it notes? Is it just about how you enter and think about things every day? You know, what does that word mean?
That's a good question. So my background is food, and so a lot of what everybody's been talking about is innovation. I understand, and these roadmaps, and you're developing products, and you have all this consumer insight. We're in a much different space. So Claire's has been on a journey for the last 2 years to reimagine itself from a mall retailer, as we all visited when we were kids, into really a global brand. And that means you see us in as a CPG brand. So you'll see us popping up in Walmart, and Macy's, and CVS, Jewel. We're kind of everywhere right now, growing there. We're also growing in our e-com business, and we're trying to pop up in different areas where you normally wouldn't see us. And so for me, innovation has been all about creativity in this job, because I don't actually own a product line. I own the brand of Claire's. And so it's really trying to jump over all the development we should have done as a normal, mall retailer moving into a brand that we kind of went stagnant for a bit, and really we're right now trying to reboot all of that, and so it's really getting on the forefront of creativity.
So what I just heard is you have all the accountability and none of the control.
No, I mean, in some cases, I actually feel like the company is incredibly open-minded. While it's really hard sometimes when you're talking about marketing. So when I started a year ago, marketing was a sign. My budget is a sign budget. And so everyone would say, oh, is my marketing up? And you're like, yes, oh my gosh, the social post is performing, and we have this influencer, and blah, 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 blah. And they would just stare, and they're like, no, the sign for the mall. And you're like, oh, like that's where we are. So we're in a really interesting spot where you're like, oh, stop asking for social posts, ask for an email. Like, please ask for an email, because that'll help your numbers. And stop asking for a sign. I will get you all the signs you want. They're really boring. But what you should be asking for is this. And so what we're trying to do right now is teach our merchant partners really like how to work us better, like how to pay us off to get better marketing. And so, yes, I have all the accountability, but I'm starting to get some of that control and just building really good cross-functional partnerships.
Awesome. So what was that like? How did you get people who were thinking as merchants and thinking in terms of items and turning items in retail? How did you open up this notion of marketing can be more?
So it's really taking them into the process of building like the fun Post-it note room thing, which actually just sounded a little crazy. It's taking them in as part of the process. So when I started, there were two big things I got to work on right away. So one is launching our C-Lux brand, which is a higher end jewelry brand at Claire's, and the other one is also branding our piercing experience. So before, when we all got pierced, it was just a piercing booth in Claire's, and now it's Pierced by Claire's and launching it as an experience. And so when you take all these merchants, and they get to work with a lot of fun product, but their jobs are really in numbers, and so you get to take them in the room and say, like, let's look at all this stuff, like let's build what your vision board is, like let's talk about the product, let's get exciting and more creative. That has brought them into the conversation a lot more, and so then they're excited. And then the other thing happens where they all want, I think Connor kind of touched on this, where everybody's in line then, and they're like, so I have flat back earrings, and I think it's going to be the biggest thing of the year. And they are big, but we don't have to work very hard to sell them because everybody wants flat back earrings. So it's been really interesting just taking them along on the journey where they've never really had a marketing department. They've never had to engage a marketing department that way. It's just been, can I have a sign, and then you get a sign, and this is okay, and that's it.
Like my sign, I was all good.
Yeah, thanks for my sign, I'll put a picture in my deck, and then I check, and then we move on to the next product
So Carolyn from Gatorade talked this morning about Gatorade's challenge. I think she said, our target is always 13 to 18, but we're getting older. I would imagine you have a similar challenge. Like, how do you, from an innovation standpoint, stay in touch with your consumer? And how do you figure out, it's really a three-part question, but how do you stay in touch with them? And then how do you figure out kind of what are the long-term trends versus the sort of flash in the pan, gonna be gone before you get there kind of things?
Yeah, so we do very traditional things. So we started consumer insights for the long term, understanding of the consumer. So that's like monthly, we check in on our trends, we check in on how people are feeling about sustainability, we check in on how they're feeling just about us, our CPG product, like, are you guys cool with players being like in all these places? And they are, thank God. And then the other thing is, do a lot of social listening to pay attention to those trends. But really, some of the places that we've gotten the most, but there's two things. One, it's being humble enough to know that, like, as in my 40s and with my career, I really don't know at all what Gen Alpha and Gen Z are going through and what they want. So it's being humble enough to be open to listening to them. But also, like, we have a college intern program, and and they share a lot, and they really give you a lot of feedback, and they engage with you in a way where you're like, okay, this is cool. Like, I'm cool. We're cool. We're talking about this. And so it's really making sure that you're tapping into them and seeing the trends as they're coming up and being part of trends. And so that has been incredibly helpful. And just listening. Like, I feel like in my earlier years, I would go to focus group and I'd be like, oh, Chris, you're gonna say this. This is the right answer. And you can kind of figure it out. Like, if you try the product and you're like, well, of course, that's the better one. But now it's just being like humble. I know the pieces of marketing that are important, but I also know that these kids are shopping in a different way. They have very different expectations. And someone had said it earlier, like, they know exactly what they want. They're much more confident as a shopper. So that has been really, like, just like cluing into that has been really helpful as we build our marketing plans.
What's the most effective method of cluing in on that?
Oh gosh, we're like crazy and neurotic. I mean, we're just moving so fast. Like, the brand needs to move from a mall brand into this global brand. And so we're kind of jumping over 20 years of like mall marketing into and trying to beat out all of you, right? Because we're marketing to the youngest, fastest, most imaginative, most entrepreneurial group of people. And so I would love to say, like, oh, it's this thing, and we have plans. I mean, quarterly plans, we don't have quarterly plans. Like, we lay out stuff, and then the next minute you're like, this is actually what's trending, and we need to go here. Or, we work with a lot of creators, and it's like, this is the, we thought we were going to do a lot around Bama Rush and all of this stuff, and it actually ended up, we diverted into some other things that were popping up. So it's just being actually incredibly flexible and listening a lot. Like, a lot. We pay attention a lot. We talk about it a lot.
Mostly social, or are you bringing focus groups together still, or what?
Yeah, so we have monthly focus groups, and we have monthly panels where we talk to people, but it's really social. It's like social listening, and then just we have like our interns or younger people that are really like, pay attention to this, and then you start down this track and pay attention to what's going on. I think I've learned that we have major gaps as we get older. Like, I remember when I learned like Revolt was a brand and it was like $1 billion brand, and I'm like, I work in clothing. At the time I worked in clothing, I was like, how am I that old that I don't know?
That doesn't get better with age.
No, I know, it gets worse. It gets so much worse. I'm just like, oh, I have my little world. And so it's constantly showing up and knowing that you need to be open and learning things. And my CMO does a really good job of that. Like, she's super hip and super aware that like we need to be at the forefront of culture or creating that culture, and pushes us all to think that way and live in their spaces.
What surprised you most about Generation Alpha?
So I have Generation Alpha kids, so I may have the insider track, but they're incredibly confident and much more aware of their shopping habits and what we want from them, and they know to ask. So an example is we launched a game in Roblox called Shimmerville. It was super. I'm like, oh, this is fun, and da da da. Like, I played it like I would play Nintendo. And then my 9-year-old was like, so who's the developer on this? And I was like, oh, it's got Lon, he's great. And like, well, do you want me to just call him? Can we just call him? Because I have feedback. Because like you can't run fast, and when you do this thing doesn't show up, and I don't understand why my pets aren't like with me in other games. And he just was very clear and knew like, you want my Robux, which I get $10 of Robux a month, and I'm going to tell you what you better put in this game. And he was so confident about it, and we see that across the board. I think it's really fun to walk in our stores. You see all these littles putting out what they want to wear and how they want to express themselves. But what's different about the way they do it versus the way we did it is we all fit into, clearly I'm a prep. Like, I was a prep. I've always been a prep. Like, that's where it was. I would never show up to school looking like Wednesday Addams. But you have lots of kids that are prep one day and showing up like Wednesday Addams the next. And so that, I think, it surprises me, but also makes me slightly uncomfortable because I was like, oh, look, all the rules of how I need to behave in high school or junior high or now, like, still are based in these lines that they have completely just like cool, that's great that you live that way. I'm not into that. It's just like they don't even acknowledge it. They're just like, that's
who I am today. And
hey, boomer, yeah. I'm like, I'm not a boomer. That's your grandparents. Not me.
I love it.
So then, as the steward of the Claire's brand, what does the Claire's brand stand for in your mind, and how do you kind of hold on to those brand truths through all this?
Yeah, I mean, through every generation, we're there to help the littles and the teens and empower them to express themselves. So whether that's like me, prep all the time, or however you want to show up, and that is a universal truth. What's changing is what I just said, which is that creativity and that ownership of self is so different with this generation than it was in past generations. So making sure that we have that space for them to safely experiment with like all kinds of styles and different ways of showing who they are and showing up as who they are, that changes. But
I forgot to ask you the most important question.
oh yeah.
Did the game designer take your 9-year-old's advice?
Oh, he did. Oh my God, he was like, for free? Like, it was like he was like, oh my God, you have, and I'm like, I can line up the third graders right now if you want. Like, I thought, that's been actually really nice. Like, I see in our consumer, like, they're in my life, so it's so nice when I bring home a bunch of product to watch all these kids in my neighborhood just like dig in, and they'll like give me feedback, and they get really excited about some of the stuff where I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, unicorn earrings, I really want those, but I like probably can't. But they're just right there, like, I need a glow in the dark unicorn earring. And I was like, yes, you do. And that's been really, actually, that's so fun.
So you mentioned Shimmerville, that you have a bunch of things out there on YouTube. If you haven't gone out and looked, it's really, really fun to go look at this brand and all the stuff that's happening. I think it's Dear Claire.
Yeah.
Obviously, retail sales is the ultimate goal, but how are you measuring the success of some of those kind of mid-funnel projects?
Yeah, it's engagement. So just making sure that we're engaging our audience and they like the content that we're putting out. So Dear Claire is something that came from an article that was in the New York Times about 2 years ago talking about the mental health of this generation. And obviously now we're talking about it a little bit more, but at the time it was like the first thing was like, y'all need to pay attention, this generation is struggling. And so it was like, how do we are going we're in the middle of redeveloping this brand, and we really handed off our brand to these consumers and said, what do you expect from us? Where do you want to see us? What do you guys want? And Dear Claire was one of those things where it's like, well, we want to tell ours, like we want to tell our stories. This goes back to the confidence of this generation. We want to tell our stories, and we want to tell it to each other, and we want to represent that on in a space. And so Dear Claire is really a video content series that we developed with all these girls where they address different topics, some incredibly serious, like how they, manage depression, and then some like how do you do your style. And so that really just came from our audience and consumers saying like, well, you work for us. And this is what we want to see. And it's actually been it's really fun. I mean, the girls are so, we actually had them to a photo shoot, and I was like, I'm so intimidated. Like, oh, there's like the 18-year-old that's like so cool. But they're so confident, they like know what they want. It's just honestly, this generation, the Z and Alpha are so refreshing. I find them so refreshing.
we were talking just before the session, and you mentioned that in a lot of cases, the purchaser can be the parent.
Yep.
Did you get any parental resistance to the Claire's brand going into, issues of mental health or other places, or?
Not at all. We actually have like parents. I mean, of course, we got permission and we're
Sure, of
parents,
course,
like,
yeah.
all of that. But we had parents that reached out and told us how important it was that we address these issues, and that how happy and honored they were to be part of it, and how their daughter felt the same. So we brought some of them in just for an internal conversation within Claire's and all of our employees. A lot of parents actually showed up to the conversation. It wasn't just the girls. And just saying, like, we, as parents, and I am speaking as a parent, it's like you just don't, we're in like uncharted territory, and so to let the girls talk and create a space for them to talk to each other about this stuff, they were actually very positive. We got really positive.
That's fantastic. All right, now this is really intimidating because I have the Italians in the room, and I'm going to mess this up. But you have a brand partnership, a content partnership with Giannis, Nicola Formichetti, is that correct? Yeah, what he said. Who is, for those of you who don't know his name, is most famous for doing Lady Gaga's meat dress. So obviously, this is somebody who pushes boundaries, pushes design, pushes forward. How have you managed a I'm sure, very strong personality with your brand and keeping those things working together and in a direction you want to head?
Yeah, he's actually incredibly lovely. So definitely strong creative direction, but like an amazing partner.
Yeah.
So just want to put that out there. We talked about this earlier with innovation. Like where our innovation is coming from is through the creative lens. Like our demographic and our audience are very creative, and they're all over Pinterest, planning all kinds of things. And so to take us beyond where my framework is as like the head of brand, we need people like Nicola to push us in that direction. So he did, he's very avant-garde. He did some great stuff for us with our Paris opening. He helped us design the store of the flagship there, and it was perfect. It like really, you're just like, yes, this is exactly why you work with someone to push you into this space, because we can be so limiting within our brand, and you have someone come in and they can just visualize it in a completely different way. And so he's been great. If you go to our stores, he did the photo shoot for Halloween, so all of that stuff for Halloween and Homecoming is all with him. And I think you need partners like that if you're going to challenge yourself in a creative manner.
Yeah, fantastic. I have more questions. I'm seeing a lot of interest. I just want to check, does anybody in the audience want to ask something before I go back to my questions? Always shy first, we always give it a minute. Yes, please.
Meghan, I think I find very interesting the journey of your brand, right? In a very fast-forward way to the future. Where is the challenge between retail, brick and mortar, right? Being the traditional location where the exchange of the brand experience is happening, versus this generation being so digital native that are expecting perhaps to buy your product more through the digital platform. So what's the journey there? Do you see brick and mortar not becoming a consumer ice cream basically, but do you see a more experiential component, maybe smaller footprint, or do you expect the two channel to move independently? What's the journey there?
Yeah, I mean, we are testing. Yeah, so like, how do you move out of the experience being just a mall retailer?
Yeah.
So we are experiencing with different store formats. It is something that we're looking into. But actually, this generation likes the mall. So we are seeing like a lot of Gen Alpha likes to come into the store, and they like to try the product and look at the product. So actually, our mall space our mall retailers are doing fine. But we still need to figure out how we grow beyond that, because they are buying off of things, like TikTok is huge, Pinterest is huge, so like how are we engaging that, and it's stuff that we're constantly working on. The other thing that we had talked about earlier is a lot of the, our end users Gen Alpha, but their parents are millennials.
Yeah.
And just to speak as a millennial, little neurotic shoppers, like they spend a lot of time on their phone and then they go in and buy things, and the younger generation actually doesn't shop that way. Like they're very confident walking into a place and not knowing what they're going to buy. So like designing our stores in a way that makes sense for that type of shopping, we are going through that right now. So experiential, but more in a treasure hunt kind of way than like a single product or something that you see in a lot of experiences. So we are doing that, and then just trying to figure out how you do e-com with this generation, because I personally don't think e-com will looks like how I shop on my Nordstrom right now, which I adore and spend too much money on. But I love it on the app and I love it on the web, but they're just not going to shop that way, even though they're very comfortable on their phones. And so trying to figure out what that is and testing in all the different ways that they shop. I think that's what we're investing in little trials that way. Mike can still have to go in the store though, they don't have phones. I'm never going to give them a phone.
Do you have a theory of what that future of e-commerce looks like? We were talking earlier about in your panel about the future. Do you have a vision of what that's going for?
No, no. Does anybody? No.
Yeah, no. I'm just curious.
No, I mean, like it's so fun. Like what's so nice is I find technology, like adopting technology has been so fun for me. I watch my parents too. Like we make fun of like the boomers, but like my parents are super cool and they're just like zooming around on their little iPhones and doing things, and you're like, okay, like this is actually just here to make our lives easier. And so whatever's easiest. And I think that's probably what it's going to be. With this this generation, their creator spirit and their just like, that they inspire so much and they're so different, I think it's just going to be crazy. Like I just buy things that I'm told to buy. Like Nordstrom's like, you like these jeans. I was like, you're right.
And these shoes go with
and
them.
oh yeah, it's like in like 4 years I'll be wearing the same outfit, just a little bit different. But my kids, like these kids are just like, I do this and I do that and I do whatever, and I'm an artist and I'm a hockey player and you can't put me in a box. And like I don't know how you figure that out, right? But I'm not that person, I'm brand, so I'm not that person. But someone will figure it out, and it's going to be really cool, make all our lives easier, and we'll all be able to live more creatively because this generation has pushed us into a space that right now I'd probably be uncomfortable being. Yeah.
No, I love it. So let's talk about you for a minute. You've had a really interesting, fun career. You've worked for, let's see, Whole Foods, Pete's Coffee, Farmer's Bridge. You've been really unique brands that maybe aren't the dominant in their category, but have carved out a really unique space. Do you think innovation is different for those types of brands than from, ConAgra that's got a lot of market share? Or how do you think about innovation for different groups?
Yeah. How do we say this? So it's kind of nice to be in second, because you get to be like a little hungrier and a little bit of a jerk. Not a jerk, but like you're just like, yeah, you're like, I'm gonna poke that bear, watch me do it. And it's kind of like, I really like that. And like what the jobs I have been lucky to work for amazing brands, especially in Chicago. Like, a lot of those brands are not based here. I also work for Trunk Club and Nordstrom, and it's just getting to do a job within a company that has some like cool stuff. I have really enjoyed. And so when I'm the first person to do that job, which I always have been, that I really enjoy. And so usually if you're the first person to do the job, you're not the big, like it's the first VP of brand at Starbucks is probably like retiring right now. So that I think is why I enjoy that innovation there. It's just like, you kind of get to look at the big guy, but they're a little slower moving, and you can just test a lot more things. Like you just get a little bit more space, and I think that's really fun. So
it's all open.
It's totally it's open season on it. No, I don't want to say that. Like it's really fun, and at Claire's, like we are we are a global brand, and we are a big guy. But I think people are like, oh, Claire's, and I used to love you, and I'm like, okay, well, you're gonna love us again. Like we're done, and we're gonna get all the kids, and they're gonna love it, and we're gonna drive this creative spirit with this generation, and it's just gonna be awesome. And so I love, like obviously my competitiveness is coming out hard right now, I'm sorry. But I just love it. I think it's really fun to sit in that spot and figure out how you can solve against somebody with more money and more ammo.
Amazing, amazing. I think, John, we're at time.
All right.